A handful of Republicans have spoken out about Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago dinner guest, the outspoken anti-Semite and white supremacist Nick Fuentes. They've either condemned Trump outright or made the obvious statement that anti-Semitism is bad, so wrong, while avoiding any mention of Trump himself. But the most important response came from Republican House Leader Kevin McCarthy, whose response is very telling of what his party is willing to overlook.
I don't think anybody should be spending any time with Nick Fuentes. President Trump came out 4 times and condemned him and didn't know who he was.
Well, he just said he didn't know who he was. He didn't condemn him or his ideology.
Well, I condemn his ideology.
Ah, yes, the whole he didn't know who he was bit. Feigning ignorance, a form of Republican gaslighting. The same tactic used by Marjorie Taylor Greene when she spoke at the annual Nick Fuentes white supremacy prom. She said she had no idea who he was, never heard of him. Yet she spoke at his conference and joined him on stage right before he called young white men America's secret sauce and applauded Putin and Russia. But you know who Marjorie does know? Her former intern, Milo Yiannopoulos. Remember him? The misogynistic, racist, xenophobic, transphobic troll who called Islam a barbaric alien religion. Breitbart's white nationalist Pied Piper, Steve Bannon, gave him a platform when hiring Yiannopoulos as the website's editor. But Milo resigned after a video of him endorsing pedophilia resurfaced online. You know, he kind of disappeared after that, and the world moved on. Well, guess what? Milo is back. A source told NBC News that the entire dinner was an elaborate scheme orchestrated by Yiannopoulos. Yiannopoulos, who is anti-Trump and an advisor to Ye, told NBC News, quote, "I wanted to send a message to Trump that he has systematically, repeatedly neglected, ignored, abused the people who love him the most, the people who put him in office. And that kind of behavior comes back to bite you in the end." It appears Trump, the bully, the heckler, the harasser, the troll, finally got trolled. He should have seen this coming. It was Trump, after all, who brought this toxic, gross trolling back into conservative politics. The internet mob mentality and abuse campaigns that are now the Republican norm. Yiannopoulos, Fuentes, Ye, they've all got one purpose: getting Trump back to this base. Even better, getting a seat at the dinner table. Joining me now is MSNBC political analyst and former Senator Claire McCaskill, and Kurt Bardella, Democratic strategist and former spokesman for the House Oversight Committee, and more importantly, for the purposes of this, someone who knows these people. And so I'm going to call upon you. I know you hate to go back there, my friend.
Don't bring me back there, Joy.
Got to put you back there. I mean, I remember Milo Yiannopoulos because this was the time when Twitter was the worst. It was the worst of the worst. This was the meme era. This was when you first saw Pepe the Frog memes, Pepe the Nazi Frog memes. You know, he was a super troll. He ended up attacking a brilliant comedian from NBC News and getting bounced off Twitter. But he only was set aside by Breitbart et al. After the, saying pedophilia was okay thing came out. But then Milo pops back up. He becomes Marjorie Taylor Greene, ironically, her intern, even though she's supposedly a QAnon. They're supposed to be against pedophilia. So in your view, isn't this just a return to that era, like around that 2012 to 2015 era, when the social media kind of memeology world and attack world was ascendant and they loved Trump?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, people like Milo, they're kind of the OGs of the Twitter trolls and of this new form of hate speech that manifests itself across social media. And it's not an accident, by the way, that all of this came at a time when who was our president? The first black president in the history of this country. That's not an accident. That's by design. And through the figures that have now emerged in today's Republican Party, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Matt Gaetzes, the extremists, the Kari Lakes, they see these people as a vessel for them to return to prominence, because it's not that their views are so out of line with the Republican Party. It's that now the Republican Party has moved and embraced openly these what used to be called extreme, fringe, perspectives that would get you kicked out of the club. Well, now they see in these figures a way back, and they are getting that warm embrace. And the fact that someone like Milo could be in a position to set up a meal with the former president of the United States at a place where the guy kept classified documents should terrify just about everybody.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, Claire, it isn't surprising to me that Donald Trump met with Fuentes. It just isn't surprising to me because, number one, he was there with a celebrity, Kanye West, now known as Ye, so Trump's easy to get at that way. But also, the things that the things that Fuentes fundamentally says, I've never heard Trump refute them. And I've never heard Kevin McCarthy or any of them really denounce them, because the truth of the matter is he represents part of their base. And you've worked with some of these senators who, I don't know if behind the scenes they've admitted to you, they've had to make compromises in their moral fiber and accept some of this neo-Nazism and fascism and this gross meme stuff because they think it's the only way to win.
Well, I think what we saw today with Kevin McCarthy is Exhibit A. When someone is so desperate for power, they set aside all of their moral character. Yes, McCarthy said Fuentes was a bad guy, but then he proceeded to lie. Just out and out lie. I mean, lying has become the norm now because Trump kind of patented it in the White House. He showed everyone you can lie and still have political success. So he lied to say that Trump had denounced him. Trump has never denounced these folks, ever. He told them to stand back and stand by. He's claimed ignorance, the guy who wants everybody to vote for him because he's so freaking smart. Then the minute he wants to play dumb, all of his followers go, oh, he just didn't know any better. And you look at Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, this is a woman who went to the conference. So did Gosar.
Yes.
And what is McCarthy doing right now? McCarthy is killing himself to try to please those two so he can hold on to the bare number of votes he must have to become Speaker of the House. It is a sad, sad commentary on where the Republican Party is right now.